Hello everyone, Fru here. Welcome to today's presentation. In today's presentation, we are going to look at a very fascinating company, and that is Snowflake. Snowflake is really an up-and-coming rising star in the data processing space. For today's agenda, we're going to look at what exactly is Snowflake. You might have heard of it, you might not have heard about it, but Snowflake is definitely a company that a lot of people are paying attention to. We're going to look at setting up a trial account in Snowflake. I'm going to go through the process of setting up a trial account. This is something that you can also set it up if you want to get some hands-on experience with Snowflake. I'm going to walk through the environments, give some commentaries about what Snowflake is all about and why you should care, or why a lot of people are caring about Snowflake. And as always, we're going to talk about the possibilities and what you can do with Snowflake, or where you can take things from here. That said, let's dive in with the very first thing to talk about the architecture and understanding what is Snowflake. So the typical architecture of Snowflake is something like this you might find if you go do a quick Google search. And just to break things down, the first thing that we see here is the storage layer. All right, and this is where things are stored, and you have the compute resource and you have the cloud services. Now, this might not make sense for a lot of people, but if you've worked with databases or data systems of the past, say your Oracle, your Netezza, your Teradata, you would realize that for one, a lot of those systems are on-prem. They are on-prem systems. You need to go out and you buy servers, install those servers, configure the servers. For the most part, a lot of them are SMPs, except for Netezza, which is kind of MPP. All right, but what Snowflake did is, from the architecture, which really transformed the data processing space, is by separating storage from compute. And this is what Hadoop accomplished for us. If you're familiar with Hadoop, Hadoop was very successful because they separated, HDFS from MapReduce and Spark as well, which is a new processing framework. So because Hadoop was able to separate HDFS, which is the file storage system, from MapReduce, it means customers can build data lakes. You can load all this data as much as you want. Storage is cheap, and then you can take advantage of compute on demand to process that data. And this is sort of what Snowflake is doing, but doing it in the cloud. So on Azure, they do it on Azure. They do it on AWS. They do it on Google. So you can load all your data into storage, which is cheap, S3 buckets as an example, or on Azure Blob Storage or GCP, and just load that data as much as you want. And you don't really have to pay for a lot of that. And then depending on what you need to compute, you can then spin up these virtual data warehouses on demand to do your computation, and you pay for only what you use. So storage and compute are totally different now at this point. And this is really what Snowflake brought to the market, which is a game changer. And then on top of that, there's a lot of services to just manage it all and make sure that everything works. For example, metadata and access control, authentication, optimizers, and all of that. But the key piece is really understanding this separation between storage and compute, all from the cloud, all from a cloud perspective. You can't go out and buy a Snowflake server to come on premise to put in your data warehouse or your data center. That doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So Snowflake is 100% cloud. This is an all cloud ecosystem. Now, there are companies that might say, but we don't want to put our data in the cloud. Companies might, or some individuals might be reticent about the cloud, but I feel like that's a foregone discussion, all right? That ship has already sailed. The cloud is where people are going. A lot of companies are going to the cloud. And so the discussion about, all right, should we go to the cloud or not? I feel like if you're still having that discussion, and then I think that's really something else. That's a different conversation to have. But companies now are poised for the cloud. And if you're thinking about cloud, the data warehouse that people are thinking about is Snowflake. A competition to Snowflake might be your Redshift from AWS, maybe BigQuery as an example from Google. And then from Azure, you might have the Azure Synapse, which is formerly the Azure Data Warehouse. So those would be the competitions for Snowflake, if you kind of wonder what the competitions for Snowflake are. All right, so I hope this gives us an architecture and understanding of what Snowflake is and why it's a game changer. It just boils down to the separation of compute and storage, all cloud-based. Snowflake was born and built in the cloud. So it's all cloud-based MPP, so massively parallel processing. And as I was thinking about this architecture and preparing this lecture, I kind of went down memory lane, and I thought I'll flash a couple of images on the screen here. Of course, that's a picture of me in here. This was a data center many moons back. I'm not going to call the company, but this is what we had to do when we wanted to spin up a data lake, or a computing environment for our data warehouse. We have to go out, buy servers, come into the data center, and make sure those servers are installed, configured, networking, and all the nuances and the headache that goes into making this a reality. And then once you have all those servers and such in place, now you have to go worry about installing the software and then actually using it. So this is months and months and months and months and months that just goes in thin air just to get a data warehouse for you to use, or to get a data lake for you to use. And as you can imagine, companies cannot put up with things like this anymore. All right, so why would I have to go through what we went through at this period when I worked at this organization to get a data lake? In this case, I think we were getting a data lake up. I'm not going to give too much details just to not give up any information that might be sensitive. At this point, we were getting a data lake up, and the process to get it was tedious, to say the least. But with services like Snowflake, with a few clicks of a button, you can get your own data warehouse, data lake, or whatever we're calling it today, up and running in a very few clicks. All right, before we go into setting up the trial account and walking through the product to get a hands-on experience of it, I wanted to share this slide here to talk about the differences between an SMP and an MPP architecture. So when you hear of Snowflake being an MPP architecture in the cloud, some people might say, but I've never heard about that. So I'm going to talk about the differences between SMP and the MPP architecture. It's very important for us to know those differences in order to understand why Snowflake is a cloud-based MPP architecture. So this is a powerful slide for it, but I'm going to bring on the screen this article, which I'll leave in the description below, that goes into details talking about the differences between SMP, which is symmetric multiprocessing architecture, which was what we used to have before, where you had a shared CPU, a shared OS, shared IO, and the way you scale is you scale that vertically. All right, versus the SMP, which is shared nothing architecture, where you have your CPU, your disk, and storage, and all of those are kind of separate for each machine, and you can scale that horizontally. So if you need to grow your cluster, just add more compute to it, or add more nodes to that cluster per se. That's a high level definition I would give for SMP versus MPP. All right, so think about SMP just being a box, and the only way to grow that box is to make a bigger box. All right, and then MPP being you have a bunch of small boxes, and if you want to grow, just add more small boxes to it and then make all those small boxes work together. Hopefully that analogy kind of helps. But check out this article if you want to get some more insights into MPP architecture. That's really what Snowflake offers. Now we're going to switch back and go into the piece of this presentation where we'll look at a demonstration. And that demonstration is going to walk us through setting up a trial account on Snowflake. So we've talked about the architecture, but what if you want to get your hands on this and actually practice and try it out and see it for yourself and see it for your organization? It's possible to do that. Gone are the days, again, let me bring up that slide where in my case, many months ago, if you wanted to try out whatever product we were trying out here, one, you need to have the money to go buy a server. Two, you have a data center that can, connect this to the network for you and set it all up before you have a chance of trying out this particular product. All right, but now with Snowflake and everything being in the cloud, with a few clicks of a button, we can try it out. So just imagine an organization can get a data warehouse production ready in hours or minutes, a few clicks. That's all it takes. All right, and so this is why Snowflake is a game changer, and a lot of people are paying attention to this company. I call it the up and coming rising star in the data space. All right, so you can see the products, check out the website. I'm sure this always changes, but what we care about here is the trial account. So what I did was I just searched for Snowflake trial. Usually I set up my trial account, and and just use it. But in this case, I'm going to go through setting it up on this video so we can see step by step how to get that trial account set up in case you want to get that. So once we search Snowflake trial account, if you're following, just search for Snowflake trial account, click on this on demand sign up. So I think that's where we should click. All right, so in here it's gonna give us tells us start your 30-day free trial, receive 400 credit, $400 of credit to try all Snowflake features. Guys, this is powerful. So we can get some credits to try out all the features for 30 days. I'll take advantage of that. All right, if you're curious about Snowflake, you should definitely take advantage of that. So let's just put in the name. Email is pretty coach for Luis. You guys know my email. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions. Title tester. I'm testing this. Company testing for YouTube. All right, select the country, United States. Very straightforward. So let's let me zoom in here so we can see what I'm clicking on. Let's get your account set up. Let's just do standard. I'm not going full enterprise. Choose your cloud. Amazon is fine. US, Canada, Central is fine. So you can choose based on your region. For me, Central is what I care about. I don't want to go on the east or the west. Yeah, Central is fine for now. I was gonna think about maybe going on Ohio, but Central is fine. All right, phone number is fine. Let's click and finalize the setup. All right, I'm gonna take this off on the screen so I can put in my phone number and come back just so it doesn't show. All right. Okay, so let's bring this back. So I did put in the phone number and it says, thanks for signing up for your account. You will receive an email to activate in the next 15 minutes or so. If you don't see that, you know, reach out to that support, and that's very typical. So I'm gonna go back on the other screen here and check my email to see if I got that email that came through. So just hang on for a second. Usually these things come fast. So I'm gonna refresh my email here to see if I got any message from Snowflake. All right, so it took a few seconds there or a few minutes, but I did receive the email. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that email from Snowflake. I'm just gonna give it Coach Fru Luis. And then for the password, I'm going to put in a password here, of course, a password that nobody knows about. All right, so let's get started. Hopefully everything looks right. All right, so this brings me in. Just hang on for a second. I'm gonna make a note of what we just did here. So I'm gonna make a note of my username and the password. All right, so we got that out of the way. Now, so this brings me into a brand new Snowflake environment, something that I can actually use. So here it tells me the name of my account and the name of this account and the worksheet. It's a full-fledged data warehouse for me to use, ready to use. So let's see what we have. We can minimize this, run queries, connect to partners, connect with partners to load data, explore data warehouses, view query history, secure data sharing. So let's check the first one, run queries. So of course, I think it shows me my database. My database is in here. Next, preview your data. All right, so anyways, I'm just gonna go through and do a walkthrough of this. So this is the Snowflake environment. In a few clicks, I have a working data warehouse here for me to use completely in the cloud. All right, Snowflake is cloud-based, all from the browser. And this is a game changer for organization. I haven't bought any servers and any machines to install, nothing like that. All right, so companies can get up and running with this very, very quickly. You might be asking, actually, this is a good question to address. So somebody might say, well, I'm very used to something like MySQL. Why don't I just, get my SQL and just install it, on the cloud and take advantage of it? Yeah, you can do that, right? You can run MySQL, say, on Azure, or MySQL on AWS. That's possible, all right? But MySQL traditionally is not built to be a data warehouse. And this really comes down into the difference between being a data warehouse, OLAP, versus just being OLTP, which is your online transactional systems. So MySQL, something like this might be good for online transactional systems, but if you're thinking about being a data warehouse where you load data and do a lot and lots and lots of processing and querying on top, then Snowflake is really the tool of choice. So in case that was a question for anyone out there, hopefully that just answers it very quickly. All right, so this is where you think about Snowflake. This is a data warehouse. This is not just a database like any other database. This is really optimized for loading massive amounts of data and being able to put massive amount of querying on top. If you've ever worked with a data warehouse, say Netezza, which I'm very familiar with, once you load a lot of data and lots of people are querying that environment, if it's not a good environment, things will just bog down very quickly. So that's what Snowflake does. So Snowflake is not MySQL. Snowflake is a totally different thing. All right, so let's look at the database here, demo database. There's a public environment here. All right, now I have no schema. Let's see sample data. So it does provide some sample data. This is the first time I'm coming in here, so just bear with me as I kind of click through. All right, so the util database has nothing. All right, but if you think about your database on the left side here, this is where we see our databases. So if I was to create databases, that's what I will see here on the left side. And I'm gonna come to that in a little bit. Now, once you have a database in here, let's take, for example, whatever this is, TPCH customers. All right, if I wanted to query this table, I'm going to do it in the middle area here, which is your query environment. So for a typical user writing queries on Snowflake, this is where you're going to be writing the queries on this canvas here. All right, I'm guessing I can come in here, preview data. Let's do that as a matter of fact. All right, so it's going to preview the data. And from this right side, I can see the data currently in that table. All right, if I wanted to actually run the query against it, I'm going to do select star from. Of course, we need this name. For some reason, I can't copy it and bring it over, but that's fine. I'm going to type it. So we need the name of the database, which makes sense, like you're querying a typical database. So dot, then we need the name of the schema there. Let's see that. I'm doing this for the first time. 00, is that 00 or dot customer? Hopefully that's correct. Select star from that. Is that correct? Let's try it. Run. Yep, it's correct. All right, so I'm going to the database, I'm going to the schema, and I'm pulling out the table. I can specify all of that. And I'm sure there is a way to do that without having to specify it if I was in the context of that schema, and I'll show that in a little bit. All right, so that's very simple, very trivial, but let's do a walkthrough again of the environment. So I can write queries here, I can see my results here, I have all my tables, my schemas here, like what you expect in the typical data warehouse environment. So on the top here, this seems to be the main pages you can browse. So databases, right? You can see all your databases. If I wanted to create a new database, I'll call it, say, YouTube. Can I type? Yep, I can. YouTube demo. Let's just call that YouTube demo. This is for YouTube tutorial videos as an example. Let's just give it. We can see the query for that. So that's the query that goes ahead to create that database. Let's close that, finish that. So I'm sure it's going to create a database. So right easy, you can have a new database. All right, you can clone a database. If I wanted to clone this database, you can go ahead and clone that. You can drop it. You can transfer ownership to somebody else. All right, so right now it's all public. Shares, this is for Snowflake data sharing. I don't think I have any share set up. So, and I believe the idea for this is organizations, because this is all in the cloud. Snowflake now can do things that people could not even think about just a couple of years ago. So you can actually have data sets within your organization And instead of having some ETL that spits out a file and you have to FTP that file to somebody else and the person takes it and then loads it back into the data warehouse, that just goes away. Because if I am on Snowflake, you're on Snowflake, we're all in the cloud, why don't I just take it from my S3 bucket and put it in your S3 bucket and share it that way? All right. And so this really is a game changer in terms of how companies can interact and share data. And I believe this is what this is about. Warehouses. So warehouses, this is really the compute layer of Snowflake. Let me bring back the slide that we saw. If I bring back the slide, what we saw here is, again, Snowflake separates storage from compute and the cloud services. All right. So here we have the storage area. Very, very powerful. So we have that storage area, very powerful. The warehouses is a compute. So even though we can load data and store data, which behind the scenes, when you load data into Snowflake, it's actually just storing that on an S3 bucket somewhere. It can either be your own S3 bucket and become a link table, or Snowflake's controlled S3 bucket is still on S3. All right. So even though you have that data on stored, if you want to compute that data, this is what the data warehouse does. So you're using a data warehouse for compute. And I'm not very versatile or very versed with the payment structure of Snowflake, but I believe depending on how much compute you use, that's what you pay for. So you can load data as much as you want. It's kind of cheap to store data these days. But if you have a lot of compute that's going on in your data, you just simply pay for that. And customers kind of like that. So I have a compute warehouse here. It's a small one. All right. If I'm not using it, it's suspend. So I'm not paying for something that I'm not using, auto suspense. And I'm sure you can configure how you set this all up. I believe you can go ahead and create a new data warehouse. Let's call it YouTube. Why can't I just type it? So let's do YouTube. Let's do YouTube DW warehouse as an example. You can make it large. I probably don't want to do that. It's probably going to take a lot of I'm sure the bigger you make it, the more you have to pay, right? And it means your queries run faster, but you have to just know what you get what you pay for, basically. That's what I always say. So those are my data warehouses. All right. And the reason why I have this tool is I'm going to show that in a little bit. Worksheets, we saw that. That's where you run your queries. And then history is basically seeing all the queries you've run. So far I've run a couple of queries here. Nothing too big. So you can see the history of every query. And those are filtered to my user. So you can change it to see it by the warehouse. You can change it to see it by a specific user. So there's some administrative capabilities in here that you can take advantage of to know which user is running a query, how long it took, what warehouse did they use. You can see the session, start time, end time, duration. If your duration starts degrading, then you might want to use a bigger data warehouse. All right. And then you can set up different warehouses, because this is the compute layer for different workloads. So you can think about marketing. Maybe they have a bigger budget. They can now buy or pay for a bigger compute warehouse. If finance doesn't want to pay for it, then their compute warehouse is smaller. All right. And so you're giving flexibility based on consumption. And this is something that, is very hard to do is if you're just working on premise, but in cloud, you can do it. Load your data, fine, easy. We can all bring the data. But if you're going to be computing and doing a lot of calculations on this data, well, just pay for what you do, right? And I think that's a natural way to do it. So Snowflake is really offering that. So grant privileges, that's fine. Operate. All right. I know I created all of this, but if I was an admin, I could really get into the details of security and all of that. But for now, we'll just go with the power basics. Let's check the Power Connect here. All right, so here you can take advantage of, I believe, partners that you can use to bring data into Snowflake. So everything from Fivetran, Stitch, you can use Stitch to bring data into Snowflake, Sigma, and quite a bit of other tools that you can use to bring data into Snowflake. All right, so that's a very, very high level walkthrough of Snowflake. Now, in the next video, I am going to go through, I would set up using Talend to load some data into this Snowflake data environment, and that will be part 2 of this. And once we've loaded that data, I'm going to walk through how to actually query that data in Snowflake. I can use a sample data here, but I usually prefer to bring in my own data. So just stay in the next video.